The galaxy was filled with many different kinds of life. Every star system had its own stories, its own heroes, and its own warnings. Among the many tales told across the stars, few were as proud and as loud as the claims made by a group of alien civilizations. They called themselves the masters of survival. To them, there was no world too dangerous, no storm too violent, no predator too fierce. They believed they were unmatched, and they carried that pride like a crown. These aliens often spoke of the planets they called Deathworlds. Worlds where storms could tear down mountains, where the soil itself was toxic, where creatures hunted not just with teeth and claws, but with cunning and patience. To step foot on such a planet was to gamble with life itself. For most species, even the thought of trying meant certain death. But for these aliens, surviving there was their badge of honor. They would tell stories of how they endured the unendurable, and how no other species could even dream of matching them. When other species gathered at great councils, these aliens always made sure to remind everyone of their superiority. They mocked those who relied on machines, ships, or weapons. In their eyes, technology was weakness, a crutch for the fragile. True strength, they argued, was written in the body, in the instinct, in the ability to survive nature's fury without hiding behind walls or armor. And among their favorite targets of mockery were the humans. Humans had been in space for some time. They had joined the great community of species and had already proven themselves in science, trade, and exploration. But to these proud aliens, humans were seen as soft. They lived in cities, protected by technology. They traveled in ships, guided by navigation computers. Their bodies were smaller, lighter, not built for brute strength compared to many other alien forms. Humans could never survive a true death world, the aliens often laughed. They need their machines, their tools, their shelters. Without them, they are nothing. The laughter spread, and soon it became a common saying across different stations and colonies. Other aliens began to believe it too. They whispered that humans were clever, yes, but fragile. Brave in words, but weak in nature. To many, humans were nothing more than guests in the galaxy, tolerated but never truly respected. Yet behind the laughter, behind the arrogance, there was also something else. Curiosity. The galaxy had seen humans do things that did not make sense. They traveled farther than expected. They endured longer than predicted. They seemed weak, yet they always came back standing. It bothered some of the proud alien races, though they never admitted it out loud. But the question remained, what would happen if humans ever tried to step foot on a real death world? The challenge was not spoken directly, but it was always there. The aliens hinted at it in their gatherings, in their speeches, in their boasts. We have faced death worlds, they said, and triumphed. But the humans? They would crumble in the first storm. They would fall in the first night. For the humans, these words did not go unheard. They listened quietly. Some smiled, some shrugged, and some, deep down, felt the fire of determination. Humans had always carried one trait through all of history. Whenever someone said they could not do something, they found a way to prove them wrong. Generations of human history were filled with such moments. When nature threw storms, they built shelters. When disease spread, they discovered cures. When predators hunted them, they learned to fight back, not with strength, but with creativity. Humans were not the strongest, not the fastest, not the fiercest. But they had something that did not break, the will to keep going. So when the whispers of challenge reached the right ears, the humans did not argue with words. They did not shout back. Instead, they began to plan. Explorers, scientists, and adventurers gathered. They studied the records of the death worlds. They listened to the stories of those who claimed to have survived them. And instead of fear, they felt curiosity. Instead of hesitation, they felt excitement. To them, this was not a warning. It was an invitation. The alien races did not expect this. They thought humans would laugh nervously and avoid the subject. They thought humans would admit defeat before the challenge even began. But instead, humans volunteered. They said, "Show us these death worlds. Let us see for ourselves." For the first time, the proud aliens were silent. They were not used to being challenged, especially not by a species they had mocked for so long. Still, their pride did not allow them to refuse. In fact, they welcomed it, though secretly hoping the humans would fail. To them, this was their chance to prove, once and for all, that humans were fragile, that their laughter had been justified all along. Across the galaxy, news spread. A mission was being prepared. Humans would step foot on a death world, one of the deadliest known to exist. Different species tuned into the news, curious to see what would happen. Some expected disaster. Some hoped for survival. But all agreed. The outcome would change the way humans were seen forever. On Earth, the response was mixed. Some worried for those who volunteered. The risks were enormous. The dangers beyond imagination. But others supported them, knowing that this was more than just a mission. It was about showing the galaxy who humans really were. It was about proving that survival was not only about claws or teeth, but about spirit. In the days leading up to the mission, the volunteers prepared. They trained not only their bodies, but their minds. They studied survival skills, ancient techniques once used by their ancestors who had lived in the wilds of Earth. They packed tools, but not too many, for the point was not to rely on machines. And most of all, they carried with them something no alien could measure: hope. The aliens watched, some amused, some doubtful. To them, it was only a matter of time before humans would give up. They did not believe humans could understand the true fury of a death world. But humans did not flinch. They smiled, they encouraged one another, and they kept moving forward. And so, the day came when the ship was ready. The humans stood at the edge of history, ready to land on a world where even the strongest aliens had barely survived. A world filled with storms, with predators, with challenges beyond imagination. The proud alien races gathered to witness it. They wanted to see the moment of failure. They wanted to confirm their superiority. But in their hearts, though they would never admit it, a small question lingered. What if the humans succeeded? Because deep down, they all knew something they did not want to say out loud. For all their laughter, for all their mockery, humans had a strange habit of doing the impossible. And as the human ship entered the skies of the death world, the galaxy held its breath, waiting for the story that was about to unfold. The death world had always been a place of warning. Its skies were restless, thick with storms that never seemed to end. The land below was a shifting battlefield, filled with mountains that broke apart in quakes, rivers that roared with deadly currents, and forests alive with creatures that had survived by evolving into relentless hunters. For generations, this world had been spoken of in whispers, as a place where only the strongest of the strong could endure. To the proud alien civilizations, it was their crown jewel of survival, their proof of greatness. But on this day, the story of the death world was about to change. The human ship entered orbit, a quiet silhouette against the angry clouds below. For many aliens watching from afar, it felt unreal. They had never imagined humans would actually take the challenge. To them, humans had always been clever builders, traders, and thinkers, but never true survivors in the raw face of nature's fury. And yet, here they were, preparing to step onto the very ground that was meant to break them. Inside the ship, the humans stood together. They had trained, studied, and prepared for months. But more than training, they carried something stronger: the unshakable belief that survival was not just about strength, but about will. Their ancestors had once walked through deserts with little water, crossed oceans with nothing but the stars to guide them, and endured winters so cold that even fire struggled to survive. That history was alive within them now, written not in muscles or claws, but in memory and determination. The ship shook as it entered the thick atmosphere. Outside, lightning lit up the clouds in blinding flashes. Winds roared, slamming against the vessel as if the planet itself wanted to keep the newcomers away. But the humans did not panic. They tightened their grips, steadied their breathing, and waited for the storm to pass. To them, storms were not new. Earth had given them hurricanes, blizzards, tornadoes, and tempests. They had faced skies that tried to tear their homes apart before. This was frightening, yes, but not unfamiliar. Finally, the landing gear touched the surface with a heavy thud. The ramp lowered, and the first steps were taken. The ground was harsh and uneven, the soil cracked and dry in some places, muddy and shifting in others. The air was heavy, filled with scents both sharp and sour, the kind that warned of hidden dangers. Yet the humans did not hesitate. They walked forward with careful steps, eyes scanning everything around them. Each sound mattered. Each shadow mattered. They moved as their ancestors once had, alert and ready, not with fear, but with awareness. The aliens watching through distant screens leaned closer. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Some expected the humans to stumble immediately, to be overwhelmed by the pressure of the environment. Others waited for the first predator to strike, confident that the humans would run in panic. But to their surprise, the humans kept moving, slow and steady, marking the ground, leaving signs for one another, mapping the unknown. What shocked the observers even more was how the humans seemed to adapt quickly. The heavy air that felt suffocating at first was met with controlled breathing. The unstable ground was handled with teamwork, each helping the other when the soil shifted. Where one stumbled, another offered a hand. Where the path looked dangerous, they paused, studied, and then moved together. To the aliens, survival was often about proving individual strength. But to humans, survival was a shared effort. And that made all the difference that as the hours passed, the humans set up their first camp. They did not build large walls or fortresses. Instead, they created small, clever shelters that blended with the surroundings, using both the tools they carried and the materials of the land. They lit controlled fires, not large enough to attract danger, but enough to keep them warm and ward off smaller creatures. The camp was simple, but it was safe. Night fell quickly on the Deathworld, and with it came new dangers. Strange cries echoed through the darkness, the calls of unseen predators circling the area. The ground trembled as massive creatures moved in the distance. For most species, this would be the moment to panic, to retreat. But the humans had known nights like this before. On Earth, their ancestors had once listened to wolves howling in the forests, lions roaring in the savannas, and unknown shadows creeping just beyond the firelight. Fear was natural, but giving in to fear was not an option. Instead of panicking, the humans used their fear as fuel. They stayed alert, set watches, and took turns resting. They shared quiet words of encouragement, reminding each other that dawn would come, that every long night eventually ended. And when small predators tried to creep closer, the humans did not run. They stood their ground, using fire, tools, and loud shouts to drive them away. To the predators, these strange beings were not prey. They were something new, something that would not break easily. From their distant stations, the aliens watched in disbelief. This was not what they expected. They had seen many species attempt survival on this world before, and most had failed quickly. Yet the humans were holding on, not by sheer power, but by refusing to surrender. Each decision they made seemed simple, even small. But together, those small choices built a wall stronger than any muscle or claw that as days turned into weeks, the humans pushed farther. They explored rivers, climbed rocky cliffs, and crossed fields filled with dangerous plants. Each challenge tested them, but each challenge also revealed their adaptability. When a plant's thorns poisoned their skin, they learned to avoid it and found ways to heal. When the rivers tried to sweep them away, they crafted ropes and rafts, using the current instead of fighting it. Where the ground quaked, they built shelters that bent instead of broke. Again and again, the Deathworld tried to force them out. Again and again, the humans found a way to stay. What astonished the galaxy most was not just that they survived, but how they survived, with cooperation, creativity, and relentless endurance. They were not the strongest, not the biggest, not the fastest. But every time the world threw something at them, they responded with a mixture of knowledge and stubbornness. They refused to accept defeat. For the proud alien civilizations who had once laughed, this was a bitter realization. Their claim of superiority was shaking. They had believed that only brute strength and natural resilience mattered. But the humans were proving that survival was not about one single trait. It was about the mind, the spirit, and the ability to adapt. Soon, word spread across the galaxy. Stories of human endurance traveled from station to station. Species who had once doubted them began to look with new respect. Questions filled the air. If humans could survive here, what else were they capable of? If they could endure the worst nature had to offer, what did that mean for the future of the galaxy? But for the humans on the Deathworld, none of this mattered yet. They were not thinking of glory or reputation. They were only thinking of the next day, the next step, the next challenge. Their focus was simple: keep going, no matter what. And as another night fell over the dangerous world, the humans gathered around their small fire, tired but unbroken. Above them, the storms raged on, but in their eyes there was light. The aliens had claimed that humans could never survive a death world. But the humans were already proving that they were not only survivors, they were something far more dangerous to doubt. This was only the beginning. The days on the death world stretched longer than they should have, each one heavy with tests and hidden dangers. The humans had already survived storms, predators, and poisoned thorns, but survival here was not just about one fight. It was about many fights, one after another, with little rest in between. Every new dawn brought something unexpected, and every night carried the same question. Would they make it through until morning? At first, their struggle was about simply staying alive. The air was thick and strange, filled with particles that made their lungs burn. The water from the rivers carried unseen toxins. The soil hid insects that bit with stings so painful they could leave a person unable to walk for hours. It was as if the planet itself wanted to drive them away. For many species, these problems would have been enough to end their attempt. But the humans refused to back down. They started by learning. Each hardship became a lesson. When the air felt too heavy, they adjusted the way they breathed, finding a rhythm that eased the pain. When the rivers made them sick, they created ways to filter and boil the water, turning danger into something drinkable. When insects attacked at night, they built nets from plants and fibers, protecting themselves in the simplest but most effective ways. What made them different was not that they were fearless. They felt fear, just as much as anyone else. But fear did not freeze them. Fear pushed them forward. Every problem was treated not as an end, but as a puzzle waiting to be solved. Their ancestors had faced similar struggles on Earth: harsh winters, dry summers, wild beasts, and diseases that once seemed unstoppable. And just like their ancestors, these humans adapted. The struggle deepened when the larger predators began to test them. Strange creatures with massive jaws and quick legs stalked their camp, waiting for a chance to strike. To fight them head-on would have been suicide. But humans had never been creatures of brute strength. Their real weapon had always been their minds. They laid traps, used fire, and created noises that confused the predators. They worked together, shouting, clapping, and throwing stones to make themselves seem larger than they were. Slowly, the predators learned that these strange newcomers were not easy prey. The aliens watching from across the galaxy could hardly believe it. To them, the humans looked fragile compared to the beasts of the Deathworld. No claws, no armored skin, no natural venom. And yet they endured. It became clear to the observers that humans were not just surviving. They were adapting faster than anyone expected. Where others had fallen in days, the humans were growing stronger each week. Food was another great challenge. Many of the plants were poisonous, and the animals too fast or too dangerous to catch. Hunger became a constant companion, pressing against their willpower. But humans had known hunger before. History had taught them how to stretch their resources, how to share, and how to endure the ache of an empty stomach without giving up. Slowly, they learned which plants could be eaten if cooked long enough, which roots carried nourishment, and which creatures could be hunted without too much risk. They began to balance their meals, even if small, and turn survival into something sustainable. The greatest struggle, however, was not with the land or its creatures. It was with the mind. The Deathworld had a way of wearing down hope, of making every sound in the night feel like doom, every shadow a lurking threat. The silence of the wilderness was broken only by the screams of predators or the crashing storms. For some, such a place would crush the spirit. Loneliness, fear, and exhaustion could destroy someone long before hunger or injury ever did. But humans had always been a social species. They leaned on each other, spoke to one another, and reminded each other why they had come. They told stories around the fire, stories of Earth and of the generations that had struggled before them. They laughed when laughter seemed impossible, because even a single smile could carry hope into another day. Together, they kept their spirits alive, knowing that survival was not just about the body, but also about the heart. With time, adaptation became their way of life. They began to move farther from their camp, testing themselves against the world. They climbed cliffs to watch the land from above, mapping its rivers and valleys. They built stronger shelters that could bend in the storms rather than break. They learned to read the behavior of animals. When the skies darkened and the birds grew quiet, it meant danger was near. When the winds shifted, it was time to prepare for storms. Bit by bit, the Deathworld revealed its secrets, and the humans wrote those secrets into their survival. The aliens could no longer deny what they saw. The humans were not just visitors. They were becoming part of the Deathworld, shaping themselves to fit into a place that was never meant to accept them. It was not easy, and it was never without pain. Every victory came with wounds. Every adaptation cost them effort and exhaustion. But still they continued. There were moments when survival seemed impossible. Times when storms ripped apart their shelters, when creatures attacked in the night, when sickness spread through their group. Each of these moments could have ended everything. But humans had something else, a refusal to surrender. Even in their lowest moments, when strength seemed gone, someone would stand, someone would push, someone would remind the others that giving up was not an option, that it was the spirit that shook the galaxy. Strength could be measured in muscles or claws. Intelligence could be measured in inventions and tools. But what humans carried was harder to define. It was a quiet fire, a determination that no storm could drown and no predator could silence. Slowly, they stopped being seen as intruders by the alien civilizations. Instead, they became something far more dangerous to underestimate. They were proof that survival was not about being born strong, but about becoming strong through struggle. They were living evidence that adaptation could turn the weakest into the most enduring. As more weeks passed, the humans began to thrive. Their camp grew into a settlement. They built with more skill, hunted with more strategy, and faced the land with more confidence. The death world was still harsh, still unforgiving, but it was no longer their enemy. It had become their teacher. Every scar on their bodies, every lesson in their minds, every memory of struggle carried meaning. And though they still faced new challenges each day, they no longer feared them in the same way. They had learned that no matter what came, they could endure, adapt, and rise again. The aliens had claimed that humans would fail, that they could never match the strength required for a death world. But the humans had shown something greater. Survival was not about strength alone. It was about heart, will, and the power to change. The death world had tried to break them. Instead, it had forged them, and this was only the beginning of their story. The death world had been cruel since the very first day, but over time the humans had learned to live with its cruelty. They had learned to breathe in its thick air, to drink its filtered water, and to defend themselves against predators that lurked in the shadows. For weeks, survival had been their only goal. But then, something began to change. The land that once felt like an enemy started to feel strangely familiar. Every sound, every movement in the distance, carried meaning they could now read. Every danger that once shocked them had become a test they knew how to prepare for. It was in this moment of familiarity that the real turning point arrived. The first sign came with the storm. Not just any storm, but the kind that carried the force of destruction itself. The skies turned black, the air charged with energy, and the winds screamed through the valleys. Lightning split the heavens, striking trees with fire, and rain poured so heavy it felt like the ocean itself was falling from the sky. Their shelters, which had stood against smaller storms, shook as if they would be torn apart. The humans had seen storms before, but this was unlike anything Earth had prepared them for. First, panic spread. The winds tore down walls, the rain flooded the ground, and the fire from the lightning spread quickly through the dry trees. It seemed like everything they had built, their camp, their tools, their fragile sense of safety, was about to vanish in a single night. Yet in the chaos, something remarkable happened. Instead of scattering in fear, the humans came together. Some fought the fire with dirt and water, others held the shelters down against the winds, and others guided the young and the weak to safer ground. Their voices rose above the storm, not in fear, but in unity. They worked as one, each person carrying the weight of the other. And when the storm finally passed, battered and exhausted, they looked around to see something incredible. They had saved most of what they built. That night became the first true turning point. Not because the storm had nearly destroyed them, but because it had revealed what they had become. They were no longer fragile survivors clinging to hope. They were builders, fighters, and protectors. People who could face the worst this world had to offer and still stand when it was over. The aliens who observed them could not believe it. Species far stronger had fallen on this planet without lasting even half as long. Entire colonies had vanished without leaving a single trace. But humans had faced disaster, and instead of breaking, they had adapted and grown even stronger. The second sign of the turning point came soon after, when one of the great predators returned. This was a creature the humans had encountered before, a massive beast with jaws that could crush bone and a roar that carried across the forest. The first time they had seen it, they barely survived, driving it away with fire and noise. But now, when the beast returned, the humans did not scatter. They prepared. They had studied the predator, learning its patterns and weaknesses. They had built better weapons, sharpened tools, and laid traps along its path. When it came charging through the forest, expecting easy prey, it found something very different. The humans fought together, using fire, sound, and cunning. They lured it into a pit they had dug, using its own strength against it. The battle was fierce, and the danger was real, but this time, the beast did not leave them trembling. This time, it left them victorious. For the first time since arriving on the death world, the humans were not only surviving, they were winning. This victory changed everything. It was no longer just about avoiding death. It was about claiming their place in this hostile land. They were not guests here anymore. They were becoming part of the world itself, bending it to their will in small but powerful ways. The aliens watching realized something frightening. This was exactly what made humans dangerous. They were not the strongest, not the fastest, not the fiercest. But when the world tried to crush them, they rose. When predators tried to hunt them, they learned. When storms tried to destroy them, they rebuilt. Each challenge only made them more prepared for the next one. The third, and perhaps most powerful sign of the turning point, came not from storms or beasts, but from the humans themselves. One evening, as the sun set over the jagged hills, the group gathered together around the fire. They were scarred, bruised, and tired, but there was something new in their eyes. For the first time, they were not talking about simply surviving until tomorrow. They were talking about the future. They spoke of building stronger homes, of planting food instead of only searching for it, of creating signals that could reach the skies. They were no longer only reacting to the world's challenges. They were planning to shape it. The death world was no longer just a test they endured. It was a place they intended to conquer. That firelit night marked the moment they shifted from survivors into settlers. And it was in that shift that their greatest strength revealed itself. Hope. Not blind hope, not empty promises, but a deep and steady belief that no matter how harsh the world was, they could endure, adapt, and rise above it. This hope frightened the galaxy more than their weapons or their traps ever could. Because hope, combined with determination, was what had carried humans across their own world, from deserts to mountains, from frozen tundras to endless seas. And now, that same hope burned brightly on a planet where no other species had ever lasted. The turning point was not a single moment, but a collection of them, surviving the storm, defeating the predator, dreaming of the future. Together, they became proof of something the universe had long ignored. That humans did not merely exist on dangerous worlds. They thrived on them. The death world had thrown its worst at them, and instead of crushing them, it had awakened their greatest strength. And for the first time, the aliens who had once mocked humanity's chances began to feel something they had never expected to feel towards such fragile-looking creatures. They began to feel fear, because they now understood that the human story was far from over. It was only just beginning. The world was quiet after the storm, but not the kind of quiet that meant peace. It was the kind of quiet that came when the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. The humans had survived storms, they had defeated predators, and they had started to carve out a place for themselves on this hostile world. But it was on one single day, a day unlike any other, that the galaxy truly began to fear them. It was not because they built the strongest weapons, nor because they were invincible. It was because they revealed something no other species had ever shown before, the unshakable spirit that could not be broken. The story of that day began when the aliens returned. For weeks, they had been watching from the skies, observing, waiting for the humans to fail. At first, they had believed this strange little species would last no more than a few days. When that did not happen, they thought the storms or predators would finish them. When even that failed, they assumed hunger or despair would crush them. But the humans had endured it all. Now curiosity had turned to unease, and unease had turned to fear. And so, the aliens decided to test them directly. The humans were gathered near their camp when the sky split open with light. A great ship descended, its shadow covering the ground, and from it came a group of alien beings armed and certain of their superiority. They looked down upon the humans as if they were insects who had wandered too far. The aliens expected the humans to bow, to tremble, or to scatter. But instead, the humans stood firm. Their clothes were torn, their skin scarred, their hands rough from struggle, yet their eyes burned with something the aliens had never seen before. The leader of the alien group stepped forward, speaking in a voice full of arrogance. It declared that this world was theirs, that no human had the right to claim it, and that the humans should abandon all hope of surviving here. It was not a negotiation. It was a warning meant to crush whatever spirit remained in them. But instead of fear, the humans answered with silence. They looked at one another, not at the aliens, and in their silence was an unspoken understanding. They would not leave. They could not leave. When the aliens grew impatient and raised their weapons to show power, something remarkable happened. The humans did not fight back immediately, but they did not kneel either. They simply stood their ground, as if daring the universe to test them one more time. It was not strength of arms that spoke in that moment, but strength of spirit. And the aliens, for the first time, felt something they had never associated with such fragile creatures: hesitation. But the moment that turned hesitation into fear came soon after. The aliens unleashed one of their own engineered beasts, a monstrous creature bred for war. Its roar shook the trees, and its size towered over the humans. This was meant to end the story once and for all, to prove that no human could stand against such raw power. But the humans did not run. They had faced predators before, and they had learned. Together, they acted with precision. They spread out, drawing the beast into the traps they had prepared. They lit fires to blind it, they used sound to confuse it, and with sharpened tools they struck at its weakest points. It was not a quick battle, and it was not easy. The ground shook with every step of the beast, and danger was everywhere. But slowly, carefully, and with unyielding determination, the humans brought it down. When the beast fell, the earth trembled, and the firelight revealed a sight that made the aliens' hearts pound with a new, unfamiliar feeling: fear. For the aliens realized then that humans were not just surviving on this death world. They were thriving, learning, and adapting faster than any species had the right to. The very things that should have destroyed them had instead made them stronger. The humans stood over the fallen beast, breathing heavily, their bodies tired but their spirits unbroken. And then, something even more terrifying happened. They looked up at the aliens, not with anger, not with hate, but with calm determination. Their message was clear without a single word: we are not leaving. We are not giving up. We belong here, whether you want us to or not. In that moment, the galaxy's arrogance shattered. The aliens who once mocked humanity's weakness now saw the truth. It was not about strength of muscle or sharpness of claw. It was about the will to fight, to endure, and to rise again no matter how many times the world tried to crush them. That will, that fire, was something the aliens could not conquer. The day ended with the alien ship pulling back into the sky, leaving the humans below. They had not bowed, they had not been broken, and they had not been erased. Instead, they stood taller than ever, united in their struggle, their hope stronger than any weapon. From that day on, the story of the humans spread across the stars. Species whispered about the fragile creatures who had stood against storms, beasts, and even the arrogance of the galaxy itself. They whispered about how the humans, against all odds, had claimed their place on a death world. And they whispered about the fear, because if humans could thrive here, where no one else could, then where could they not survive? The humans did not ask for fear. They did not seek to terrify the universe. All they had ever wanted was to live, to protect one another, and to find meaning even in the harshest corners of existence. But it was exactly that unshakable bond, that deep loyalty to each other, that made them unstoppable. The day the aliens learned fear was not the day humans destroyed them. It was not the day humans showed overwhelming power. It was the day the aliens finally understood that nothing, not storms, not beasts, not despair, and not even the galaxy itself, could ever take away humanity's will to endure. And from that day forward, the universe could never look at humans the same way again. Because when the galaxy met humanity's spirit, it did not see weakness. It saw a force that even the harshest worlds could not kill. And that was the day the aliens learned fear.